You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the latest episode of Star Trek Prodigy called Observer's Paradox. That's right, Observer's Paradox, not the Mystery Spiral, as I said last week, because at one point they apparently changed all the episode 2 titles. Mm-hmm. So we're discussing Observer's Paradox. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Jason Tyler. Hey, Father.
Hello.
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Trek on Apple Podcasts or in Spotify, on TuneIn, or in your favorite podcast app. And you can also watch us on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you should make sure to hit the bell to get notifications and, of course, subscribe. Another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy is called Let's Science, which you can find wherever fine podcasts are found, or at sqpn.com/science. And we are aware of all the big news that's dropped from San Diego Comic-Con. We won't be getting into it today, but maybe in a future episode we can talk about some of the stuff they announced. But rest assured, we're getting prepared to talk about a new season of Lower Decks and Section 31 and all the stuff that's coming. So, very good. So, Jimmy, we are going to be discussing Observer's Paradox. Can you give us a recap of what happened in this episode?
This week, Janeway debriefs the kids about the failed rescue attempt they made last episode and puts them on restricted access. Majel goes back to her Nova Squadron buddies, and Admiral Jellicoe announces that the wormhole must be closed, even though this means losing Chakotay and endangering Gwen's existence. Reluctantly, Janeway closes the wormhole. However, with Murf's help, the kids link the strange spiral that people have been seeing to Chakotay. The kids also finally find a way to communicate with Murf, who delivers them a message, "Find me," along with a strange set of numbers that are too short to be coordinates. Eventually, Gwen realizes that she needs to modulate her temporal stabilizer to match those numbers, and she's transported to a reality where she's taken to the spiral and hears the message, "Find me before they do." Returning to our reality, she says she knows where to find Chakotay and that the spiral is a map. The end.
Father, your overall impression of this one?
Not a bad episode. I found it not extremely exciting, but interesting as it moves things along. It, in some ways, to me, felt like an old Voyager episode. We're back on the Voyager the whole time, and we have, of course, the Doctor heavily involved in Janeway as well, as we're looking for Chakotay. So
it was a bottle show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of was. Jimmy, your impression?
Yeah, it was fine. I have some writers' nitpicks about some of the logic in this, but as an overall episode, it was fine. One of the things that I thought was problematic about it was Jellicoe's order to just shut that wormhole.
Yes.
Even if you're willing to lose Chakotay, if you've got a girl there who's got this temporal stabilizer who could wink out of existence, I think, and who knows what additional paradoxes that's going to create, I think that should have been explored further before they closed the wormhole.
And
Right.
Janeway put up such little protest toward the order as well.
Yeah, it was odd. I think in because we have a time change. You know, we've changed history, so it's weird that Starfleet would be okay with just leaving it be as it is without trying to figure out what changed and maybe change it back. But I think they're probably banking on the audience's attitudes toward Jellicoe. You know, he's sort of a bad guy.
Except he's totally not. It's not in any previous incarnation we've seen.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But
Right.
we kind of
just
dislike him.
Got a different style.
Yes. So a couple things I wanted to mention, or at least one thing off the bat, is the title, The Observer's Paradox. And that apparently comes from the idea that the act of observing a situation can have an effect on the outcome of the situation.
Right. That's called the observer effect in physics.
Yeah. What do you think they're referring to in this case?
I don't know. I think they were taking the heat off Mystery Spiral because that's what this episode's really about.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if it has something to do with this mysterious, probably Chakotay, other entity, who by observing it, by interfering in it, it's affecting the outcome. I don't know. It is weird though.
I had sort of two thoughts. One was, we're looking at the after effects of this, of our heroes having gone back in time. They didn't just observe the past, they interfered with it.
Mhm.
And then, that question of what's happening with Gwen at the end as she modifies her temporal stabilizer. Will she in some way end up interfering with things that maybe was once trying to observe?
Mm.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, it could be a couple different things.
By the way, on the subject of the mystery spiral, now in episode 1, right out of the gate, or episode 2, whichever it was, I called that the mystery spiral voice was Chakotay. And last week, I mentioned that I'd learned about an upcoming casting choice that put me in doubt about that, because I could see this other casting choice that we haven't come to yet being behind the mystery spiral. But here, they really relink the mystery spiral to Chakotay. So I'm kind of back to where I started. It looks like it's Chakotay, though I'm still thinking this other casting choice that we haven't come to yet may be involved.
Yeah, I mean, they really made it explicit that the mystery spiral that we're seeing is the image or the carving on Chakotay's Hakuchi-Moya stone there that he gave to Janeway. We see in a flashback before his first protostar mission. So I think eventually they'll reveal to Janeway this mystery spiral thing, and she'll connect it to Chakotay, et cetera, et cetera. That's one of the frustrating things and I've mentioned this before, is the kids withholding information, like the plot being driven by withholding information or lack of communication. And I really dislike when it feels like a crutch when writers do that.
Oh, it go ahead, Father.
Oh, sorry. You're just going to say the writers keep trying to throw little surprises at us, though, too. So, I mean, it would not at all be uncharacteristic to throw out so many clues that it's Chakotay, and then at the last minute,
That's true.
Swerve it some other direction.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
The withholding of information, I've seen much worse. Now, in this case, we have a bit of a justification for the because we've got an adult crew and a kid crew, and they're operating independently of each other because kids are not adults. They're not fully integrated. And so it makes sense to me that the kids would have some information that the adults wouldn't, and vice versa. I've seen much worse, though, in terms of withholding information driving the plot. I mean, that happens repeatedly in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I mean, there are entire stories like the Yellow Face and the Sussex Vampire that would collapse if one adult had done the sensible thing and told the other adult what was going on from the beginning. And we're not at that scale here, but it is a pet writing peeve. Speaking of another pet peeve, and this is just on the dialogue level, but there's a scene early on where Janeway's debriefing the kids about their failed rescue mission, and Majel mentions that they were helped several times by an unknown entity. And then she has to say it was all highly illogical. And it's like, no, it wasn't. It was an unknown entity helping you, and you understood that. There's nothing illogical about this. This is just a writing trope that writers have latched onto for Vulcans, and they're overusing it in this case.
Yeah, when they encounter something unexpected or that doesn't fit with previously understood ideas, it's suddenly illogical. That's not illogical. It just doesn't fit with my previous ideas.
Yeah. And it's not just illogical, it's highly illogical. So, it's like, can anything be just a little surprising once in a while as opposed to highly illogical?
It's very unique.
Yeah. On the other hand, I did really like a line they gave the doctor, which was, he said, "I haven't seen a crew this dysfunctional since the Cerritos." Yeah.
Yes. That's in my notes too. That was good. The doctor also got another good line, which was, "I've got a headache and I don't even have a head."
Yeah.
Which was good. Yeah. And then there's actually was a funny reference in that debriefing where Dal is trying coffee, coffee being Janeway's
signature drink.
Yep.
Yeah. And he says, "This is way better with sugar," because that's a callback to season 1 when he tried coffee for the first time black, I think it was, and he hated it. And
yeah, that was when he and Janeway had switched bodies or something too, right?
Right. Yeah. Mind Walk, I think was the episode.
Yeah, exactly. So someone gave who appeared to be Janeway a cup of coffee, and Dal couldn't drink it.
That's right. That's right. Now I remember that. Yeah, that's good. So the crew, our young crew, the Protostar crew, I'll call them, they're kind of feeling the consequences of their actions. They're kind of like, we have had these consequences laid upon us. We have restrictions, new restrictions put upon us. And then Dal just wants to keep doing things his own way. Like he just doesn't, is it he doesn't learn his lesson, or he has this instinctual understanding that I know better? I mean, what do you think? Because usually he's right.
It's a personality trait, and he's a kid.
Yeah. Although, yeah, I mean, I think it's particularly Dal as a kid personality trait.
He's got a different personality than Rock does. Rock has become a super rule follower.
Yeah, that's true. Man, I've got both kinds of kids among my children. The super rule follower and the one who just wants to keep going their own way. And Gwyn actually says early on, Murf could be the key to everything. Mm-hmm. And I really, and they're trying, and then they have to try to translate, they're trying to come up with a translator for Murf. I really feel like Murf is the hidden key in all of Prodigy. I think he's there. He's cute. He doesn't say much. They have this big time voice actor, D. Bradley Baker, voicing these weird vocalizations. There's got to be more to Murf than meets the eye. I really feel like there's something more coming from him.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. Back in season 1, I said he's going to evolve and he's going to be much more than he appears to be starting out. Because starting out, he appeared to be a slug. Yeah. And there wasn't any reason really to have him around. And I said, well, this is obvious. They're going to have him go through transformations. And then they had him in season 1 be transformed into a security officer. And so he became a humanoid. He looks kind of like a salamander humanoid. And now they've got him having all this information that he got from Future Guy, whoever Future Guy turns out to be, possibly Chakotay. And I predicted, in season 1 that eventually they'd learn to talk with him. It was not obvious to me until this episode that they were not understanding this season what he was saying, because it's a convention that with certain aliens we don't hear them translated, but people nevertheless know what they're saying. You see that all the time in Star Wars, right. Like a Wookiee talks and people know what the Wookiee's saying. And it wasn't clear to me that wasn't happening here, because they kind of even make a joke out of it during the debrief scene where Murf is gesticulating and gibbering, and Janeway, says, "Thank you, your comments are very helpful." And so it's kind of ambiguous. Did she get anything out of that or not? Yeah. I'm a little surprised the universal translator can't just translate Murphy's.
Seems like it should be able to.
Yeah, especially if it's got missing frequencies, because that's what they say, is that his species developed from life forms that lived underwater, and so he needs to be underwater to fully hear all the frequencies. And so they put him in the cetacean ops tank with the whale, the humpback whale, whose name is Jillian. Yes. And for people who may not remember it, that's a reference to Jillian Taylor, the cetacean expert from Star Trek IV: The Search for Whales. And so that's a nice tribute to her. I could imagine whales, that were descendants of George and Gracie, taking names like Jillian at human names like Jillian to honor their, one of the people who brought them. There were probably a bunch of other cetacean male humpback whales named James Montgomery. Yeah, exactly.
Pregnant.
Yeah. So that was neat, but then they put Murf in the tank with Jillian, and Murf starts talking, and he assumes a new form. I meant to look up, because it reminded me very strongly of, it's kind of like a cuttlefish body form. It's got these sort of edge wings around it. I needed to look up and see, is there a closer match for the body form? But he assumes this aquatic body form and starts talking, and Jillian starts translating. And here we've got another bit of a nitpick, because he's still speaking another language. Even if Jillian can hear all the sounds he's making, and you'd think the universal translator would be able to pick up those sounds from the air, because universal translators are meant to be universal. They should be able to pick up alternative frequencies that, humans can't hear. But even granting that, Jillian can now hear all the sounds he's making, but that's not going to teach her how to speak his language.
By the way, the salamander larva tadpole form does have that sort of edged tail thing that Murf had. So I think they're leaning into the salamander type here. So kind of interesting. And you're right. I think they're kind of emphasizing the inability to communicate with Murf beyond the internal logic of Star Trek. I think they should, it shouldn't be the way that they portrayed it, as you said.
I mean, if nothing else, you can think back to Star Trek 4, and Spock is able to use a Klingon computer in the 23rd century to sort of recalibrate the sounds of the probe just as if they were underwater. Why can the universal translator in 100 and something years later not adjust itself to think about what Murf would sound like underwater?
Yeah, exactly. In any case, it is, as you said, Jimmy, I think it's a bit of the writing flaw to increase the drama. And
now one possibility that occurs to me that would make sense of this is Murf may be speaking English or Federation Standard or whatever it is, and it's just his voice is so different that people don't perceive it that way, because he understands what other people are saying. Like when Future Guy was talking to him, he was understanding what Future Guy was saying. So it could be that Murf is actually speaking English. It's just that his voice is so different, people don't recognize it as such, which also happens if you ever watch BBC television about parts of Britain that are not using received pronunciation or one of the other standard English accents.
Which you need captions for. We do find out, I think for the first time, that Chakotay's people are the rubber tree people.
Oh, that's been established for a while.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah, and this is one of the tragedies about Voyager is they hired a plastic shaman to be their advisor for stuff related to Chakotay, and he was a plastic shaman is a person who is not an Indian, not a Native American, but pretends to be and pretends to have expertise in these areas when they don't. And so they wanted, and to their credit, they wanted an advisor who could advise them about Native American background for Chakotay, and they hired an idiot who was a fake and made stuff up. And so like Akuchi Moya, that doesn't mean anything. And they eventually settled on Chakotay's from a rubber tree people, or that was the translated name of his people, from farther in Central or South America than the North American plains. But I think it would have been better to just pick a tribe, he's Cherokee or Washita or Sioux or, or Mayan or something.
It would have been much better if they'd just gone with something more familiar and established and just stuck with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, Aztec, something.
Right. And at this point, Janeway does voice the theory that the entity is Chakotay. So they lay it out there in dialogue that we know, which, as Father, you pointed out, maybe just misdirection. Maybe that means it won't be Chakotay, but you can't second guess yourself the whole time. So Jellicoe does order the wormhole collapsed, and as you mentioned, and that is problematic, but it also gives both crews, because I almost want to call them two different crews, the adult crew and the kid crew, additional impetus to figure this out. And Janeway appears to want to obey, but the rest of the crew kind of stands up, literally, at their stations, the bridge crew anyway, and says, "We're with you if you decide to go against this, because we want to," because they're all in it to save Chakotay. So I thought that was an interesting Do we know what Jellicoe's role in the command structure is? Is he the CNC of Starfleet?
I don't know if he's the CNC, but he's superior to. They've always been ambiguous about who's in charge of Starfleet, but he apparently ranks Janeway, so she's like a 1 pip admiral, and he's a 2 pip admiral or something.
Yeah, I think it was like 3 and 4 or something.
3 and
but
4,
yeah, I looked at the rank insignia, and she clearly had 1 less than Jellicoe.
And they refer to her occasionally as Vice Admiral, which would put her at a 3-star, I think, if we were using the U.S. Navy conventions with that.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, so I said earlier, it was interesting that Janeway didn't protest much. It's also interesting that she did not violate orders. I mean, how many times have we seen that in Star Trek, that you get a mission canceling order from Starfleet and the captain just decides, to heck with it, I'm going to do, whatever.
That was our cliffhanger for Strange New Worlds. We're in the middle of that right now.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to see a command officer who actually follows orders for once. So
That's true.
I was going to say about
the trope can get a little old if it's always used.
Right. Well, and Janeway felt more like that was one of the interesting things with Janeway is she was more by the book, but also cast away and away from command structure. So, we never really got to see her operating within the structure of Starfleet and to see what her style would be. It is nice to see that a little bit here, even though, it kind of goes against what we want, what we might want her to do, which is to go and, to heck with orders. We're going to go save Chakotay, that sort of thing. Do we know what time frame this is in comparison to other new Trek stuff like, Picard? Do we? It's
before Picard and after Lower Decks.
Yeah. We also get a reference early on. There's a log with stardate 61865, which puts us about 20 years after the first season of Next Generation.
Yeah.
Or 7 years after the end of Voyager, I think, too.
And how far before Picard then? Do we? You guys know what the year is for that?
I've looked it up in the past, but it isn't important to me to maintain an active knowledge of that. I'm not that much of a super fan.
Well, it's just I'm trying to think of in comparison to other things that happened in Picard.
Well, one clue we got earlier was the reference to the Romulan evacuation that was ongoing. And that's why Janeway is in command of the ship at this point. Even though in the first season, the Romulans are still a very, going concern in terms of when they find themselves in the neutral zone and everything else there.
That's true. Yeah, there is that mention of the Romulan evacuation. So that's when we are. Okay. Interesting. So the message from whomever, the entity, says, find me, although it's scrambled for whatever reason. They have to, it's like sort of an anagram situation. I'm not sure why.
It's not an anagram. It's just phase shifted. It's like the same find me, only they came in at the end of the word. And so when they wrote it out, because of how they were writing it, they didn't start at the beginning of the message.
And then it's find me before they do. We finally get
at the end. Yeah.
At the end. And the they, was not resolved. But
presumably the solemn people from the future.
Right. The 100 solemn knights that are being sent out by the diviner and whatnot. Okay. Anything else? Any other notes on this one, Father Jason?
One thing I noticed, Jason Alexander is voicing Counselor, is it Noom? Is that the man's name? I watched a lot of Seinfeld back in the 90s, but I would not really have recognized Jason Alexander's voice if I had not seen his name in the credits and elsewhere at this point. And for whatever that's worth, I don't know.
So now that I know it's him, I can hear his voice in it. I mean, he's definitely doing something different. But you're right. I mean, it is definitely different. And Jason Alexander does a great Shatner. He's a huge Star Trek fan, and he does a great William Shatner impression. So it is kind of fun to hear him doing something like this. Also, I mentioned before David Diggs being Commander Tyses, the Andorian, and to hear David Diggs' voice coming out of the Andorian doesn't look at all like David Diggs, but he's got a very distinctive voice. Like as soon as I heard his voice, I knew who it was. I mean, that was pretty distinctive. So the casting is fun. They've got some big names in this, like Jamila Jamil and Noble, John Noble. Yeah, I mean, there's some great casting in this. I was also surprised, speaking of casting, Ella Purnell playing Gwyn. I didn't recognize her voice, but folks who watched the recent Amazon Prime series Fallout, she's the main character in that one. And I'm like, I know it's her, and I still don't recognize the voice. She did something very different.
I still don't recognize Derek's voice as Jankum. Occasionally I'll hear a little bit that sounds like Derek, but not much.
Yeah. Jason Mantzoukas. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. It is kind of fun to see. Speaking of alumni of the
Good Place,
Manny Jacinto in the latest Star Wars series, The Acolyte. He's very different, but he's also very much the same. And it's kind of...
He's not Jason.
He's not Jason, but you can still see Jason in there somewhere. So it's kind of fun, as an aside. Anything else, Father, on this episode?
Nothing else from my notes.
How about you, Jimmy?
Nope.
All right. Well, we don't have any feedback this time, but we'd love to get some feedback from listeners. Hint, hint, if you'd like to send us any. So now we just want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Bill Q, Andrew V, Donna C, Maria X, and Tim L. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. This StarQuest show is also brought to you by Exodus 90 and the Exodus 90 app, a daily companion to help you grow closer to God and to become the man you want to be. This summer, join the Enthronement to the Sacred Heart, the Exodus 90 Summer Book Club, and St. Michael's Lent, beginning August 15th and leading up to the Feast of St. Michael the Archangel on September 29th. Go to exodus90.com/SQPN for a 14-day free trial to the Exodus 90 app and to learn more about St. Michael's Lent. That's exodus90.com/SQPN to join us for St. Michael's Lent starting August 15th. So that's it from us this time. What did you think of the Observer's Paradox episode or any of the things that we had to say about it? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, or leave a comment on our YouTube channel where you can watch the Secrets of Star Trek, and you can find that at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing Imposter Syndrome. Until then, Father Jason, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, please state the nature of the mentorship emergency.